Hello and welcome to today's episode of Torcom Talk. I am stoked to have today's guest on, Shannon Keith. This is a woman business tycoon that's doing things a bit differently. What is she doing differently? She's saving the world. She is helping bringing women out of slavery, sex slavery, and giving them jobs as seamstresses in India. And she's built a multi-million-dollar business doing it. This podcast goes deeper than just this is how you build a successful company. It actually makes you start grappling with the thoughts of slavery and sex slavery, not only in India, but our country too. It's not anything that we should ignore anymore, and I hope that this can bring a lot of enlightenment to your life. So without further ado, please enjoy this very deep conversation with Shannon Keith and myself.
I was fascinated. I talked about our conversation a bit. So we all went to lunch Mitch as well last week and dove into like what Sudara is doing, and we've been a part of the same opportunity group. But the one thing that was really fascinating to me was how you changed the way I thought about what a prostitute in America is. And I was under the perception that it's the girl for more or less kind of chooses that. It is an easy way out. Like, look at you get paid for that, and they're into it, and their heart is nails and things of that nature. But then you told me something, and how do we make it the Romeo story that you're saying, or just break it down? What happens? Because I think other males and people and girls, because I told this to girls too at the wedding and stuff like that. They're like, really? Not everyone knows this. I actually think I only didn't inform one person on this, which was my girlfriend. She knew about it. So I think it'd be really important to first be like, how does an American girl get coerced into sex slavery?
Yeah, it's sad and complicated, right? So I think the fact that not a lot of people know and that it flies under the radar is how the bad guys continue to proliferate, right?
Yeah.
Because if everyone knew about it, then people in it stand for it. And so there's so much about education that really does change things. And this is not my full area of expertise because I work mostly in India, but through that work that's been almost 15 years now, I definitely wanted to know what was going on in our own backyard. And then, of course, I think I mentioned my husband started a nonprofit that helps minors out of sex trafficking here in the U.S. So he's much more of an expert than I am, but through his work and my passion for this population of women, not only in India, but across the world, including in the U.S., my own country, I've educated myself about it. So there are obviously outliers. This isn't a blanket statement for everyone, but I can say many people, particularly young girls, get coerced into it through this path, sort of this Romeo pimp idea that we were talking about. And so just to kind of break it down.
What is the Romeo pimp?
What that looks like is a Romeo pimp is usually a younger man who will try and win over vulnerable young girls. They're not even women yet because they're minors. So between 12 and like 15 years old. Yeah, some as young as 12. There's definitely cases where they're younger, but usually it's like puberty age because that's when the young girls will want to hang out with, catch the attention or whatever of this like handsome guy that's trying to woo her, right?
Right.
And basically we call that kind of a grooming process. So he will either be the trafficker pimp or working for said pimp, as kind of part of this group. And it's maybe his job to go and woo these young, vulnerable girls, which are really victims, to come work for them. So it's like a recruitment strategy. And they will find vulnerable young people who are, again, puberty, hormones are raging, and are really in tough situations. So classic cases might be like young girls in the foster care system, homeless teens, people who they identify clearly don't have safety nets and safe adults in their lives because they're going to be the easiest ones to win over. Okay. They're broken, they're hurting, they don't have safe adults in their life. And as a result, will then, as a Romeo would, try and woo her over, oh, you look so beautiful. You could be a model. Oh, I see you don't have your nails done. I would love to take you on a date. I would love to get your nails done, take you shopping, take you out to dinner, all of these things. She's looking for love, and she's finally saying, oh, somebody sees me. They recognize me. They know me. They love me.
Love and maybe even a family too, right? Because if they don't have one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good point, right? So just a group, a community to call your own. And it doesn't hurt that now he has money, right? Whereas maybe some of her peers that she would see as her community, other homeless teens or foster care kids or kids struggling, maybe don't have that. So that's kind of the bait, right? That they're going to use for these experiences. And soon really poses as her boyfriend. Like he wants her to be his girlfriend. And so then she starts really falling for him. And there's this relationship that he's developing. And, he might do that over a few weeks or depending the course of a few months, where she really thinks he's a boyfriend. And then that's the grooming process. And then it kind of goes into like the breaking process. So there'll be a tipping point, which is like a bait and switch. Where he will probably try and move her from her location where she would be familiar in her hometown, where she may have some people who know her or contacts. He's going to move her away from that, right? So it could be a story of like, oh, hey, I can get a job, or my brother lives in said city. Maybe if we're from Bend in Sacramento.
Do you think this Romeo pimp is doing this in a different city, bringing them to another one where I'm guessing the base of their operation would be? You think he's doing it to multiple girls?
Sometimes there's a base and sometimes they keep them on the move because once they're there is like a circuit and there'd be different circuits depending on where you're at in the US. So if you're in Bend, the circuit might include Seattle and Portland. It might, you might pop over to Salt Lake. You might go down to Vegas. You're definitely going to be on the I-5, whether you go all the way down to LA or stop in like Sacramento and Stockton.
Is Bend a part of a circuit?
Yeah. Because we're right along the 97. So there's definitely the I-5 corridor, but if they really want to go incognito, and basically you have to look at this whole ring, it's organized crime and you follow the money trail, right? So they're not doing this just for fun or sport, right? They're doing it for money. And so you look at where is their money, and Bend is an affluent area. So there are people who can afford to buy sex. And there's people on recreation who might do that as part of their recreation as well. So they're on vacation. There's a guy's trip going golfing. There's a business convention at the convention center. There's a rodeo in town. There's something going on at the fairgrounds. Where there are people gathered and people recreating and willing to spend money, this can kind of come into play.
So I've never even heard of that. I mean, obviously I see it in like Vegas and I'm like, oh, that's a hooker in New York or something like that. That's a prostitute in Chicago. I haven't seen it.
Because girls don't walk the tracks anymore. You don't need to. So with the invention of the cell phone and the iPhone particularly in just 2007, all of the dates are set up online. And then so you don't.
Why don't I know that?
Well, hopefully because you're not buying sex.
Well, no, I know. But I mean, there's an app for everything. Like, okay, so there's a prostitute app.
Yeah. There's
how's Apple allowing that to happen?
Well, I don't know that there's an app just for that, but it is like Backpage, right? Has like escort app. So anywhere where it would be. And again, they're not going to say that these are 15-year-old girls or 14-year-old girls. Everyone's 18, right? And an escort you're just paying me to hang out with you. That's legal, right? But everyone knows under the surface, like there's an exchange and it's more than just hanging out for dinner, right? Yeah. So you get into all sorts of apps that are like open source apps, even Facebook pages where you can just message and like arrange dates. So pretty much at any given moment, anywhere you are in the world, including here in Bend, you can buy sex. So I've been at a training that Guardian Group did, like my husband, and literally he had people like pull up their cell phones, but he's like, okay, be forewarned, you might get retargeted for weird things. But you can like pull up basically, I think at the time he had them pull up Backpage, and there were like 8 different ads posted that like right in Bend, 8 different ads for sex, basically. At that moment, you could have arranged a date for that night or 2 hours later or whatever.
So not that safe of a little mountain town as we thought.
No, they're in, and that's not to say that like to vilify Bend. I mean, it's a lot less than if you were to go to, a big city and pull up, you might have 200 like things, right? So it's all relative based on size and whatnot.
But they think it's not here, so I don't really need to worry about it. That's wrong.
Yeah, it's wrong. Yeah. And just because we don't see people hanging around that look like they're scantily clad like you did in the old days where women would, literally be on the street corner and you had to drive and pick them up. Yeah. They were the ad, right? This isn't like that anymore. So there's like sexy, seductive pictures. You kind of pick from there. And then literally the network, whether it's the pimp or a minion working for the pimp or whatever, will like deliver the girl to your hotel dorm.
Okay. So Ben's a part of the circuit, and now you're talking about the breaking process. And
okay. So prior to her actually being moved around, or a group, the breaking point will be where this young girl really thinks that this person is her boyfriend. And then he'll move her away from her environment. So now she doesn't know where she's at, right? So she doesn't know people. She doesn't know, maybe he'll at that point take her cell phone. There's a way that like, she's really like, so even more vulnerable. And then there's usually some sort of little incident, right? Then this is where the switch comes in, like the lie being, oh, babe, the job fell through. My brother's company is no longer hiring at the wherever. And so we need money, and now we're stuck here, and we need money to get back to Bend or to get back to wherever, or to build our new life together. We need the down payment on our apartment, or, whatever the lie he's told her. And so, but he said, if we're like, he has some easy way to make some quick cash. It's kind of gnarly, but if we're willing to do this just this once, like we will never have to do it again, and we can get like back on our feet. So, because no young girl is willingly like, yeah, let me just sell my body for sex. Like no one's signing up for that, right? There has to be a very compelling reason, and her now love and devotion for this person that she would do that, right? Even though everything in her being's probably saying, no, I don't want to do that. So, and then that's where the breaking point is. And then once she does it for the first time, it's like, oh, well, now you could do it again, and maybe we need a little more money. And then pretty soon it's like, well,
this just becomes normal.
And now there's like a breaking point.
Is drugs involved as a normal process too?
A lot of times it is, because, it's like, hey, let's party. And then suddenly, oh, you're inebriated and blah, blah, blah. And then even if you don't want to, now that's a coping mechanism that you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm going to get drunk because I don't want to face the night if I have to do this again. So it definitely becomes a coping mechanism. And then there are addicts who will sell their bodies for drugs. That's usually a little bit different. If there's
How's that different?
Because sometimes that addict doesn't have a pimp and a Romeo, and she might just be on the street and is like, literally like, I just need another hit. So I'm going to, do whatever it takes. Okay. That's kind of different than this Romeo situation, but that's another, situation. But when we're really talking about like a pimp and the horrible part is, like you were talking about women choosing and then they get to keep the money. The trademark of all this is that the girl never sees the money and she's fully controlled. So like the money will exchange not necessarily in her hands, but it will go to the pimp or to the handler who drops her off at the room. Give me the money. Okay. So she doesn't have control of her life or her body, meaning like now he's paying for her food. He's paying for her a shelter, place to stay. We've heard lots of stories from survivors around being withheld. Right? It is slavery. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. It's sexual slavery. Food being withheld as punishment.
What like the slavery that we know that has been grilled into like American society that we're taught with, African Americans being brought over here is like, the owners would have them in a roof over their head and fed, but they can't leave. They can't do anything. They can't go start a job. And if they want to kill them, then that's just how it is. And if they want to beat the heck out of them, well, these are your property. That's the same thing going on here, but in a way kind of worse.
Yeah, it's and I mean equally as bad. I wouldn't say necessarily worse, but because slaves had sexual abuse all over too, that's right? True. There's like a lot of that happened because as property, they could basically, to your point, do whatever they want, and they did. So that was horrible, and we're reaping we're still dealing with racism and all sorts of horrible ramifications of that.
Of course. Why do you think though right now in our country that at least I see, maybe you don't, but I see that people are really pretty stern and against and can't believe that we enslaved a race, right? And like that was horrible. But now it's happening, but to a sex but it doesn't carry the same weight. Like people aren't as ashamed about it, aren't talking about it.
I am just as horrified about it. But to your point, we need that same level of angst against it. And some of it is it doesn't have boundaries of race. It's more gender boundaries.
Right.
But I think part of it is, unfortunately, we live in a patriarchal society still for the most part. I mean, that's shifting, thankfully. But the men are the ones buying the sex, and the men are the ones that are the slave owners. And so maybe they're not talking about it because they still hold most of the power, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're the perpetrators of the crimes against women, particularly. Now, that's not to say there aren't some young boys. There are, but percentage-wise, it's far less than girls and women.
So now that we know that this is happening here and widespread, so basically, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, well, that girl wants to do it. Like, no, at the age of anywhere from 12 to 15, she was romanced by some good looking guy, and it was a broken home. And then she was taken away from any connections that she might have to a different place where all of a sudden things are going south and she gets coerced into having sex for money the first time, and it all goes downhill from there. Mm-hmm. And at some point, by the time they get to be 18, 19, 20, as we were talking earlier, you're saying like they get to be like kind of hard as nails and they don't want to leave. This is what they know. Some do want to leave. Some are afraid of leaving because they'll get beaten or killed, whatever the case is. But where you are really making an impact as well, or where you're making a big impact, is in India, where it's a different sort of way that they're putting into that they're put into sex slavery.
Right.
And it's by the caste system, correct?
Yes. And we don't have this Romeo pimp scenario where people are lured in, based on feelings and love and teenage angst and not having a family. It's really abject poverty and being born into the what they call like bottom of the pyramid.
So you're
population
born,
in terms of
you're
the
a born
caste.
slave, basically. You're a born sex slave.
Or you're born very poor. And so if one little incident happens that like topples everything, like the father of the very poor farming family dies and there's no other way to have an income, even if that woman or her children weren't born into the brothels, they can easily find themselves there because they don't have safety nets. And now the breadwinner has died and the mom will do whatever it takes to feed herself and her children. And so, people fall into it that way by no choice of their own, but just by abject poverty.
So then when they're in poverty, they basically are either born into it or they're, unfortunately, life circumstances happen. And then you, through your travels, end up going to India, and you were telling us a story of donating a well, and that was really cool. But then you got sidetracked, and if you could tell that, like, what happened to sidetrack? It went from donating a well to like, wait, what is going on here?
Yeah, we again, we're working with this amazing organization in India who cared about this population of people, and we're kind of trying to figure out a way to help.
And by the way, this is 15 years ago, yes?
Yeah, 2005.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, and had gone to India for the first time in 2004, loved it, went back the next year. That's when the well dedication happened. And it just so was matched with a brothel community, which at the time we didn't know that. We just were in India at the well dedication. And then it was like, oh, tell us a little bit more about this community. Who are these folks that are receiving this well? And then was just shocked and horrified to find out what sexual slavery was. Like at the time, I thought, as you did, I had a huge misconception of what prostitution looked like. I thought it was maybe the girl's choice and that she was receiving the money. I thought all of those things.
Well, I actually thought that the sex slavery thing, that was only happening overseas in places like India. And then the U.S. is like, oh, no, that's by choice. So that, mind blown as of last week on that. So anyway, to well, and you find out it's a good thing. I mean, ignorance is not a good thing. The pursuit of knowledge is what we all need.
Amen.
But anyway, okay, so you see the well, or you're donating to the well.
Yeah, working with this amazing Indian-based organization who's wanting to help this population of underserved people, right, in this brothel community. So what
was the name of the town?
It was right outside of Tenali in India. So just outside. I don't know that this little community had its own name.
Tenali, there's a map on that.
Yeah, cool. And so we started asking questions, right? I wasn't there by myself. We had a small group of people with us, my husband, my brother-in-law, my husband's twin brother and his wife. And so we were all there, and I was just asked to share a few words at the well dedication. And then through that, just started asking questions and just come to find out that, wow, this looks completely different. My mind was blown, on that day. And everything kind of I thought I knew about the world just like fell apart. I mean, I thought slavery had ended with the Emancipation Proclamation. I knew we still had a lot of work to do in terms of race and all of that. But I just did not know there were sex slaves and that kids could be born into it. And these kids weren't going to school because their moms couldn't afford for them to go to school. And I was like, well, doesn't the government pay for them to go to school? No, absolutely not. I mean, it was just like one barrier on top of another. And then those little kids being uneducated, they were just going to grow up and have the same fate, right? And so the whole just cycle of slavery continues.
Is it just females
without intervention
that go into sex slavery?
There are some men, young boys that will, but the numbers are far less, right? They would be far less, but there are some. And so the young men, again, if they're not educated, they become a lot of times with services around it. So the pimps, the brothel owners, the bartenders, the people servicing the guys, the taxi driver, all the services are around the brothel community, right? If they themselves aren't selling sex, but again, they're uneducated. So they may find jobs around this community.
Okay. So with the community itself, can you do a zoom out as far as on the map, Mitch? And as you're seeing some temples, right? So in India, there are tons of temples, and there are even such things as temple prostitutes. So that is part of a caste. A little bit. So temple prostitutes are a caste?
Temple prostitutes, yeah. So there's a whole caste of temple
I'm assuming
prostitutes.
is a religious thing. I have not been to India, and
right.
I know only very little amounts of Hinduism.
India is like 85% Hindu, and so like you'll see up there, there's a little temple that has the god there.
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of different temples all over the place. You'll see places of their worship for their Hindu gods. And there are things called temple prostitutes. So a part of their whole thing is enslaving these young girls to be temple prostitutes. So that's part of their religious kind of worship as well.
Would this be similar to like having Catholic prostitutes? Like at churches? I'm trying to, I'm not saying it's happening.
And I'm not saying too, I do not want to misrepresent because I know lovely, wonderful people and people here in the U.S. that are friends of mine that are Hindu. So not everyone that's Hindu would partake.
Catholicism kind of came out a few years ago thanks to the Boston Globe that, 1 out of 8 priests are diddling little boys.
Right.
So it's not like
Right. There's no religious institutions that's safe from scrutiny, right? And so I'm not saying all Hindus partake in temple prostitution, but there is a huge thing and problem with temple prostitutes. So young girls
will lives in the temple,
and it's kind of property of the temple priests, and people will what they believe, I think, is part of their, I don't know if they call it worship or what, is like having sex with these young temple prostitutes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is just like, gender.
It goes deep.
And it's, and, the families that buy into this, they see their service as giving their young daughters in service of this whole thing. So there's so much kind of societal injustices and cultural injustice there that are huge barriers. So that's vastly different than what we were talking about. I mean, these are still young girls finding themselves in the same situation without autonomy or control over their own bodies and people using them for sex.
Got it.
Here in the US, there in India. But the ways in which they get there, the paths that lead to their slavery are different.
So in Tenali, I asked Mitch to pull up the map because I was curious as to if Tenali itself, like, what is the rough population, and are people coming from other towns around it where there might be more wealth or less?
The sad part is this is everywhere, so you really don't need to do that. So unlike here, like in the state of Nevada, there's some I think certain counties, and interestingly enough, it's not even Vegas, but certain counties have where it's legal, right? So there's actually legal brothels. It's just everywhere in India. So people don't need to travel. They can find it in their own town. I'm sure there are places in India that would be interesting to note, like what's the Vegas, quote unquote, of India.
What made Tenali more of a brothel town than another town?
It isn't more of a brothel town. That's what I was saying. It isn't. It's just that we were working with this NGO and they happened to match our well. And the NGO we were working with in India was based out of Tenali, and they happened to match the well we were dedicating with this brothel community that just happened to be in their town.
Was that a no shit moment for you? No, just when you started to realize that this is all
this is everywhere. Yeah. This isn't like, oh, Tenali's the Vegas of India. No, this is just a little town like Bend. Right. Like, it's not as small as Bend. It might be 500,000 or 1 million people, and India's population. India's population is like 3 times that of the US. So it's 1.3 billion. So every town has it. They don't need to travel. Now, some towns are bigger than others. So you're going to get a bigger problem in the bigger towns just because the number of people is larger, right? So that's just, those are just percentages.
So how did the oh shit moment turn into a company that is doing good, helping these women out of this?
It was really
your company,
what I defined
Sudara.
as like a moment of inspiration that day. Like it didn't really have to like marinate and think about it and what should I do. It was really like an epiphany moment. So simultaneously, my heart was like shattered and broken into 1,000 pieces. And I would never see the world the same after that. It was kind of like the red pill, blue pill moment in the Matrix. Like, whoa, once you know this, you can't unknow it. And I really couldn't live with myself and go back to like my cushy job and lifestyle in Southern California. That's where I was living at the time. And so it was a moment of like, I can't unknow this and I can't live with myself if I don't do my part. And I knew my part was just a small link in the chain, but it takes everyone doing their part to like create social change that we want to see, in the world, as Gandhi said. So, that was the moment of just like, okay, these women, they need a job if they don't want to sell their bodies to feed their kids and themselves. Like, and I was like, I could probably sell something. I know how to do that.
And so something ends up becoming high stylish pajama pants.
Right. So pajamas and loungewear that are really beautiful and tell a story and are very, they are rooted, all of our raw material is in India. So it's Indian fabrics and prints and they're named after women in our program. So every pant, print, or robe tells a story of a real woman who was once living in slavery and is on her journey to freedom. So it's completely integrated. Our mission is like the very ethos and DNA of our company.
How did can you tell me about the first pants that were made and sold? Like, or the first 5 or 10?
They were funny.
But that whole, like, who was she that made them? And how did that all come? And,
so there was
who
one,
bought them from you?
Yeah,
how did this thing get going?
I know, it's so beautiful. Yeah. It's like your firstborn child, like you didn't really know what you're doing. But as a parent, so we partnered. Okay, so interestingly enough, that group in Tenali that we partnered with didn't have any other work beyond just helping with this water well for that community. So they didn't have a sewing center, or they didn't have vocational training. So when I had this idea and was like, I really want to partner, like I couldn't partner with them any further to help this population. So I had the idea of the women's pajamas and loungewear because I knew that would be fairly simple for them to sew. And it was a raw material, a textile that's abundant in India. So I wasn't sort of like exporting some American idea on what they should make. They're already a country full of like amazing textiles. But then my challenge was, okay, well, who's working with this population of women? And who would be able to then, are there any people teaching them how to sew? And what sort of vocational options are there? So then I had to do research around that piece upon coming back to the US and found a really amazing organization out of Mumbai, which is in a different part of the country, that was in fact working with this population of women and had a little sewing center, loosely, quote unquote, right? A few machines kind of teaching them to sew, but they didn't have any outlet for sewing. So that's where we could then provide a market. And I could say, hey, if we could partner together and you can make these pants that I know American women will buy, then you could have jobs for your sewing center, and then I could have something to sell, and this will be like a symbiotic, synergistic relationship. And so that's how we started. So there were 6 women with our first lot of pants. It was like maybe we made them make 100 pants or something. It was pretty small. And I sold them out of my garage to friends and to ladies at the church and to my book club. You know, it was really just very organic.
What were you saying to them? Because I'm guessing the marketing out of your garage was just you going around and telling people?
I just had a bin of stuff, right? So we didn't have a website.
What was your elevator?
You know, it was just that I went to India and I was completely shattered by what I saw. And I feel like this was a really practical way to help. Like, do you want to buy these? Or do you want to give them as gifts or whatever? And some of them, you know, they were really cute, but let's be honest, like they weren't as awesome as they are now in terms of like the quality and the fabric. And I mean, we've really evolved and improved over a decade. So some of them were like, whoa, the stitching is going to really come out easy. And like, you know, we had very sympathetic, compassionate consumers that were willing to say, yeah, we're like, these are cute, but I'm buying it because of the cause and because I believe in what you're doing and I want to be part of it. And I want to help change, right? So the first few batches were really quite funny, as probably most product companies are. You know, like you come out with your first one and then you look back on it and you're like, oh my gosh, that was so bad.
Yeah.
But at the time, you feel like it's awesome because it's your first production run or whatever.
And you're actually doing it.
And we're doing it.
You actually have something. You have something physical, and you're helping somebody immensely on the other side of the world.
You're stepping out. And you can't iterate on something unless you have the thing, right?
No,
to make
exactly.
better. So.
Yeah, you need to make a thing. You can't just think about the thing the whole time. The thing has to exist. And then you're like, oh, I didn't notice that the thing stitching, that wasn't on Photoshop. Yeah, we didn't really do stitches on Photoshop. We got to make it, and then we'll see what happens.
Right.
So something towards just doing it. How long did it take from when you had the idea? Let's say not just the idea, but you're like, this is going to happen, like that, like this is happening. This isn't like, one day, like this is happening moment, to the first pair of pants that you sold.
It was pretty fast, actually. I want to say it was like 6 or 9 months. I mean, it was pretty quick because we bought, and it was probably even sooner than that. But the pants that the women sold that the women made in the sewing center was probably like 6 or 9 months. But I bought a bunch of material home from that trip to India. And just in a big suitcase, and then like had other friends of mine who knew how to sew better than me actually like mock them up from just a print at like Joann's Fabrics pattern. And then was kind of like, hey, would you buy these? Will you buy these? Like maybe we should make our first lot as just kind of like a little bit of like a fundraiser money,
right,
so that we can have some seed money to like actually do real fabrics in a production run and that kind of thing. So it was pretty fast. I mean, I was not letting grass grow under my feet. And at the time I was married, but didn't have kids. So it became basically my full-time second job.
Sure.
Yeah. It was like a full-time job, but I was already working my full-time day job that would fund a lot of this activity.
Yeah. Out of the way, Netflix. Well, at the time, was there Netflix then?
No.
That wasn't it came in the little DVDs. Little DVDs.
Okay. Yeah.
So those are
but
not.
I don't even think that was then. I don't know.
So then, what I'm curious on is, well, a few things. One, Sudara. What does that mean?
So it's a word we made up because, again, I'm very practical. So to get the URL on other words is like impossible. So as an online company, you sort of have to like make something up.
Yeah.
But we wanted it to be meaningful and not just like completely like alphabet soup. So we started looking at like Sanskrit, basically Indian words and that were meaningful. And one is Sundara, Sundara. But of course, you cannot get that URL. And it means beautiful. And so we just removed the N. So we kind of played around with lots of different, like, hey, what does this have a ring? What do we like? You know? And then we just came up with Sudara. So because it's a made up word, it is ours. So we could, buy the websites and all of the things.
I think it's a pretty name too.
Thank you.
So then.
And so it's a riff off beautiful, because we believe that all of these women and children and human beings are created equally and beautifully. And then we have a really beautiful product. So it just plays well together.
Yeah, exactly. And then what's the consumer getting? Like what am I getting when I buy this for my girlfriend? How do I know I'm making a difference?
Ooh, I love that question. Well, you're getting lots of things. You're getting like a stellar gift at a good price, because we wanted to make it sort of, higher end, but still accessible. So these aren't like $300 pajamas, which those exist, they're out there, but that's not accessible to the masses. And what that then communicates is like, you have to be really wealthy to make a difference. And so we were very intentional staying around that $50 price point, that anyone could make a difference, because even college kids spend $50 on their jeans or shoes or whatever, right? So we wanted it to be accessible, that through your purchase, you're making a difference, because that's how this whole thing works, right? So this just, consumers are really the heroes of the story, because without them appreciating the products, buying them, wearing them, and gifting them, like, we could make all the pants we wanted, but it would stop, right? If we didn't have a market that was seeing that. Yeah. And it's a badge of honor, kind of like where people would wear Tom shoes and it was like, oh, look at, I'm cool, and the labels are on the outside and like, I'm helping people, I'm wearing these shoes. It's similar that you're helping people by gifting this product, because you could buy cheap pajama pants at Target or whatever.
Sure. But when you're saying that I'm helping people, how am I helping people through Sudara compared to like how Tom's is helping people?
So Sudara is all about this virtuous supply chain. So we don't just give virtuous supply chain. Yeah. So we don't just give money back, and we don't give handouts. So it's the whole like Chinese proverb of teaching the person to fish and not just giving them fish.
Right.
So with our virtuous supply chain, it's all about fisherwomen. And so by buying the products, you're creating jobs in that supply chain. So we need to keep making products as people continue to buy them and spread the word organically. And those that are making the products get a job. And then it also kicks off revenue for additional job training, because let's face it, not every woman who comes out of the brothels or is at highest risk wants to be a seamstress. So we don't want to force people to be seamstresses. That's sort of a different form of slavery, right?
Sure.
So we want people to choose freely. And so there's usually a handful of vocational options they could choose as part of their journey to freedom. So we create the opportunities, and then women are free to choose what opportunity they want to take in terms of their vocation.
So that's a lot better, because then you're now paying them and they can go out and buy shoes, food, whatever the case is. Yeah. Where what I'm kind of understanding from Tom's model is if I pay for some shoes and they give a pair of shoes to somebody in need, that person's just like, cool, I got some shoes. And as soon as they bust apart and everything like that, well, it's pretty much done.
Yeah.
Where you guys are like, well, what if we supply jobs?
Yeah.
And that's what they have. They now have a job and they don't have to go into sex slavery. And so you, by wearing our pajama pants, is helping these women have jobs that is sustainable and continues.
And that's a game changer, right? Jobs are a game changer.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, but it really isn't rocket science. I mean, we try and complicate things, but all we have to do is have a moment of empathy and compassion and literally put ourselves in that person's shoes, right? So in our minds, think, if I were there, would I want someone to give me a handout, or would I want someone to give me a job? It's a no-brainer. You would want the job, right? For long-term self-sustainability. So we try and make it really complicated and esoteric, and it isn't. Why is that?
Why do we want to go esoteric with it, make it complicated?
I'm not a therapist, but I feel like it gives us a pass. Because
gives us a pass?
Yeah, it gives us a pass to take action.
Okay.
Right? It gives us a pass. Because when we get all esoteric and we start like getting really philosophical, like I don't have to take action because now I'm in this different space. And then that's really complicated. And let me think about it a little bit more and let me break it down. And but blah, blah, blah. And all the time, like we're doing this and we're not just like taking decisive action to do the thing right in front of us that like as a human being with a pulse, like we should do. Right. It sort of, and I'm not saying like I love thinking. I'm not saying thinking's bad. I think it's really important. But it can become an excuse. An excuse
to not help people. I think it's, but then I could argue that if you're not thinking and putting yourself out there, or just thinking as a whole as to what is a sex slavery and what's going on, then you wouldn't be making a difference either.
Yeah. Because
you're just like, well, what's the point? I don't really like those pajama pants. It's like, well, here's the thing. It's actually supplying jeans. It's not jeans, supplying jobs. I'm like, okay, that kind of changes things a bit. Now I don't care. I'm buying them for my wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it does that. Not to say I like your pajamas. but I'm saying it adds.
If you have any taste, you will like them. But and I think the deeper thinking is really like, because we're trying to create systemic change, right? I mean, that's really what we're trying to do at Sudara. We're trying to not only get you to buy many and often our products because that directly impacts our supply chain and the women. But I'm trying to get you as a consumer to think about all of your purchasing power. I'm trying to get you to think about all of it, right? So it's not just about pajamas.
What's your next pet peeve when it comes to purchasing power? I've got a few, but I want to hear your next one.
What do you mean? Like define pet peeve?
What do you want consumers to stop buying?
Oh, to stop buying? Oh my gosh, there's so many things, right, that we could talk about.
I know, that's why I said number one.
I know.
Well,
coffee and chocolate are big. Because
Really?
those are really easy and there's slavery. Bottled water for sure. Like particularly in Oregon, like our water is so good. Seriously,
I know.
why are we putting all this plastic into the planet? Even if we're recycling it, it's just a waste.
There's a lot of studies coming out
So
over the
that's a pet
past
peeve.
few weeks of the amount of plastic we're actually ingesting because of bottled water.
Yeah, and it's just why I never do. Like, right, a glass is great. Just carry it around. I'm always
we had bottled water here in the beginning. My sister was getting it, and I was just like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Well, that's what the guests want." I was just like,
No, they don't.
We'll give them a glass of water and some ice, and it's
I
gonna be way
appreciate
more
it.
delicious."
Yeah, it's way more delicious. That's what I want. So thank you for being conscientious. So yes, that's a big one. But in terms of, I always think about it in terms of slavery, right? Like that's a lot of my filter.
Yeah, coffee and chocolate.
So coffee and
you're
chocolate
making
are
me
big
stop
ones.
eating coffee and chocolate. Why are you
No,
doing
I'm
this?
going to make you eat better coffee and chocolate.
Okay, which
right?
coffee and chocolate do I need?
So you need to go direct trade. So you need to be asking, and in Bend,
I just
thankfully,
came up with a business
we're
idea. We could quickly do like those boxes, like Karen
Yes, there
and
you
stuff
go,
like that.
right.
That's just like you have Sudara. This is how you.
They do
are.
actually have conscientious subscription boxes.
box?
Yeah, they do.
We should do
I
that one.
subscribe to it. It's good.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but they so coffee and chocolate have a lot of slavery in their supply chain, but there are lots of good companies that don't. But you can't just buy like the generic coffee and Hershey's and stuff. You really have to like go to this section at the grocery store. Most all grocery stores will, where there's like divine chocolates and like all of these. They need to be like fair trade, and it'll say on there.
What does
And
it mean
then you can buy
What does
those.
it mean when it's not fair trade? What does it mean when I'm buying Hershey's?
It means, and Hershey's won't say like, yeah, we use slaves, but they will do like 30 steps deep of how they don't really know their supply chain. So they'll go, oh, we buy it from this exporter who buys it from this and that and the other. And like, so, and then like when nobody's accountable,
Can you see if you can find anything.
Nobody's
on, like,
accountable.
Hershey slavery. You don't pull
Right.
it up. If you find anything.
yeah. So when nobody's accountable, nobody's accountable. But if you can say, which a lot of the small, like if you go to, Backport is one of my favorite local coffee shops, like there's direct trade. So it's like, no, this is bought from this farmer and they're paid fair and blah, blah, blah. Great. We don't have 30 middlemen to like couch where it's coming from.
My
But
girlfriend also loves Back Porch. We go there all the time, and she loves
awesome.
that the coffee is fair trade, and that the owners actually go and they're part of the community.
right.
all
And there are
that
other
sort of
coffee shops in town too. And so you just ask like, hey, is your coffee fair trade or direct trade is even more because then you really know, right? So Back Porch, I think most of their coffee is direct trade, but even just like fair trade, that there
I have
is
to
some.
confess my ignorance. Is there now slavery when it comes to not sex slavery, but like just labor?
Oh yeah, it's huge.
Okay.
It's huge. So if you think about
So
like
Emancipation Proclamation meant not a lot.
yeah, right. It's huge when it comes to picking agriculture. So a lot of the migrant workers are basically slaves if there aren't like fair practices and people watching. So think about picking tomatoes, strawberries, whatever. Like there's a lot of slavery that goes on there. Coffee. And then chocolate uses a lot of child labor along the Ivory Coast of Africa. So you want to get fair trade and direct trade chocolate. And you can look even like Trader Joe's, it'll say fair trade, so that means there's like a third party certifying that they have to like go through and kind of prove to be able to put that label on. It's not 100% because a lot of coffee
Kinda like
and
the
even
organic
chocolate.
label.
Well,
It's
it'll
been
be
found
like
out a
as
few
long
times.
as maybe 30% of your ingredients are fair trade, you could put it on. So maybe only 30%
Seems fair
is certified,
in a
but
fair
not
way.
in an unfair kind of way. It's a little bait and switch on the consumer. But
Yeah.
anyway, so there are, pretty much. But I mean, the rule of thumb is you have to look and ask the brand. And if they're not saying they're doing good, then you don't know and they don't know. And if they don't know, chances are they're just going cheapest, fastest, cheapest,
Sure.
because their margins are better. And so chances are there's going to be slavery in their supply chain. So you really have to ask tough questions, whether you're buying jeans, shoes, hair care products, whatever it is, you as the consumer are responsible. to hold the brands accountable. And if we start moving in that direction as a society, they will go where the money is. So if Hershey's
child labor, you go back up to child laborers.
Coco's child laborers. Yep. So if Mars, Nestle, and Hershey's
pledged nearly 2 decades ago to stop using Cocoa Hearts and children, yet much of their chocolate you buy still has it.
So they made the pledge and then they're not doing it, right?
But
so,
this is saying,
and here it is, right?
This is what I found was interesting. This
section. So how old are you? A Washington Post reporter asked one of them. 19.
And he's obviously not 19, right? So that
it says it.
Yeah, that would make him legal.
But as he talks, he casts nervous glances at the far.
Yeah.
Said so. Right. 15.
Yep.
So he's 15.
Right. And this is exactly what the girls will do that sell their bodies for sex. Like I told you, no one's going to say they're 15. They all say they're 18 or 19 because then they're legal adults, right? So again, these are children being forced into horrible situations. That 15-year-old kid should be in school, right? He shouldn't be forced to pick cocoa literally for a dessert. I mean, come on, people.
So he didn't even say it too. So he wrote it in the sand
because he would get beat. He would get beaten and fired and whatever. And this is maybe the way he's feeding himself and maybe his family or his younger siblings or whatever. So it really, the onus is on us to hold these people accountable because I promise you, if we stop buying that or demanding, they would suddenly switch over. Hershey's isn't going to go out of business. They're just going to switch all of their business to a fair trade model. Right. But because we all want to shop at Walmart and get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, they have no reason to switch.
Well,
unless the consumers demand it, they're not switching anything.
Well, hopefully we can convince 1 or 2 people from this show, maybe even more. And they're like, oh, I don't know about that. Maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 100. I already do buy, not too much in the fair trade, but organic, everything like that. Like that's something where I love what the market can do. All of a sudden the market could be like, hey, you're all eating a bunch of crap. And then we get informed. There wasn't a law that came in. There was no law that said you need to start making organic food and non-GMO food. We just said, I'm not buying this crap anymore.
Right.
And now we have entire stores that are all organic. Natural Grocers, Trader Joe's. Fred Meyer's more and more organic section is taking over the other side.
Walmart has an organic section.
Yeah, even. Walmart. Exactly. Yeah. So what you're saying is it would shift. Like it would shift
because people follow the dollar, right?
Yeah.
The problem is, unfortunately, I mean, I just am impatient and I want this shift to happen faster because to your point, there's still food deserts in our country and not everyone can afford to buy organic. So like, whereas you might be able to afford that.
Yeah.
There's lots of single moms that are struggling or people on welfare that cannot afford to buy organic. And so they're going to buy the Hershey's, they're going to buy the whatever. And so we just need to make a much bigger splash and really just, You
think that's by legislation?
I think part of it is, I think it's by just really community action, right? Like we need more community organizers. So like, for instance, that's probably a pain in the butt for my kids. And I don't not let them eat if someone else gives them a Hershey bar, but I don't buy it. Like at Halloween, I'm not buying Hershey's chocolate. I'm not buying anything. I might buy jelly beans or something, that don't have, and maybe those, I just don't know, have slavery, but they don't have cocoa beans and they're not anything. I might buy Swedish Fish or Suckers or whatever from Trader Joe's, but I'm not buying Hershey's chocolates. Even when we do s'mores, I mean, we're in Bend, we go camping a lot. I will go to Trader Joe's or I will go to Fred Meyer in the section where they sell fair trade chocolate and I'll buy all my stuff. And I'm not buying Hershey's for my s'mores. I'm buying fair trade chocolate.
Yeah.
There's milk chocolate. It's yummy. It's delicious. You can go more gourmet.
And your money didn't support slavery.
And my kids are still having s'mores and they're happy little clams, and then it's an opportunity to involve them in why they shouldn't buy these products either. Right? Because we are training up the next generation of what is acceptable or not. Right? So
you think this would be easier to do than like saying war on drugs in the 80s or 90s with cocaine? Because you'd see that Pablo Escobar and all the drugs and everything like that was killing people literally, but Americans were still doing it. And they knew, but they just didn't care.
Which is kind of what's happening right now. Like we know that our fast food is killing us and we know that like all this stuff, and yet we still keep consuming it and eating it or whatever. So
they're running into some problems, and you can say a lot of good things about like the vegan movement happening under that. And all of a sudden I could go to Del Taco and get a Beyond Meat burrito.
Yeah, which
is not that healthy. but when I'm hungover, it's okay.
If it's the bill, you don't want a salad in that moment.
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
Be honest.
I don't go to a lot of fast food except for those certain mornings. I'm like, yeah, let's get that Del Taco burrito with the Beyond Meat. But you are seeing that shift happen. You are seeing McDonald's numbers go down. You are seeing. I think I just drove by the Applebee's in Bend, and it looked like the sign was off of it. It looks like it went out of business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and across from it is McGrath's, which also went out of business. Not as big as Applebee's, obviously, but it is a chain of seafood restaurants, and that fish has been covered up by black freaking garbage bags for years now.
Yeah.
So in our town, at least, you see like, no, I'm going to be going to Jewel's or Wild Rose or any of these like local places as opposed to Applebee's. So it is possible for a market to move. And in this case, like the organic movement, it can move a lot faster. The hard part, like you're saying, and what I would love to find the answer to is, and I think you're getting to the people that are within the community and advising to not be eating Hershey's chocolate, is that money part though.
Mm-hmm. We need alternatives that are affordable, which is why, I mean, even at Sudara, like I said, we were very adamant that our price point would be accessible. Now, it's not accessible for everyone, and we get that because at some point we just have to do business, and we can't not pay our ladies a fair wage and all of that. But you have to be intentional about taking a hit on your margins, because for us, like the greater good is more important than the highest profit margin we could make, right? If I wanted to make the highest profit margin, I'd get them made really cheaply in like Vietnam or China, and then I could get the pants made cheaper there, right? But it would be slave labor and all of this stuff, and and toxic dyes to the people, and so I'm not willing to do business like that. And so until consumers start demanding these big companies to shift, they're not going to shift on their own free will. They're just not, because who of these multi-million, billion-dollar companies are going to just give up their margins to their shareholders and all of this, right? They need to.
There needs to be a reason, and that's for the wall to not open for that.
Yeah, exactly. And for big places. So for me, it's like, yes, we want to support the small businesses, the natural grocers, all of that for sure. We need more of those. We need more accessible. And we also need to not vilify the Walmarts of the world if they're willing to work with us and bring more organic things, bring more fair trade options. Stop just buying slave-laden products from China. Like, right? Let's start making that shift, because then they can distribute to the masses or the Costco's of the world, all of those.
Do you find yourself doing that in the marketing for Sudara?
I find myself educating people a lot. I mean, just our conversation where you're like, I had no idea until like we met about like the reality of. So people can get overwhelmed, kind of analysis paralysis. So I feel like if they can take one step, like that's what we want to do. Because it's like drinking out of a fire hose, as they say. Like we can't do everything perfectly. We're not going to. So what's like the one thing I can do? Is it coffee? Is it chocolate? Great. Start there.
Right.
Then is it gifting Sudara at the holidays? Great. Start there. That's like your one thing for this year. Just do that. Okay. That's now part of your routine. I only buy fair trade coffee and, chocolate, and I'm gifting from conscious company. And then next year, how do we add on the next thing? Now we're cleaning up our skincare products. Okay, now make it a habit. Like it's kind of like working out. You're not going to go from 0 to a marathon in one day.
But I find in what you're saying, when I do get committed to doing stuff like that, whether it's working out or whether it's looking at my plastic intake, like I'll start by being like, it started with bottled waters, and this was like 3 or 4 years ago for me. I was like, there's no point. It doesn't make a lick of sense. And so now I have plenty of hydro flasks and competitors, so like get them for Christmas. Facebook sends me just a bunch of this stuff. So I never am short of a water bottle. And then after I was doing that, I was just like, yeah, but these plastic bags. And before they made the law here, long before that, I was like, I got this truck of all this room in it. When I do go to the grocery store, there's no reason why there shouldn't be some reusable bags. And by the way, if you live in this town in Bend, try to go to a festival and not get 1 or 5 of those for free. When people are paying for those, it's like, just go to a festival and get like Bank of America. Now everybody, you'll have all the reusable bags you need.
We need them to get them from fair trade places.
Oh, see, like okay, so that's the next thing, right? So
they're probably getting them made really cheap in China, but anyway.
So yeah, but that's happening. And then for me, like, then this wasn't within that was happening. And then my girlfriend started showing me that like, well, why are you, when you're going to coffee shops, make sure you go back porch because of fair trade. And she's going to love this episode. I told you, I'm glad you had her on. I have her on. And I'm going into coffee shops with my own like Hydro Flask type cup.
Yeah.
Because what's the point? Like, why do I need the paper one as well?
And even if they say, like, I always just get their cup. You know what I mean? Jackson's Corner, same. I love them too. And it's like, here to go. And it's like, for sure here. Like, why would you, unless you're really getting it to go, then bring your own Hydro Flask.
Yeah.
But if you're staying there, why would you get a paper cup with a plastic lid just to throw it away? You know?
Exactly.
Like, we just can, little small changes every day can make like a huge difference. Even like when we go camping, right? We're campers. So if we must, I'll get like paper plates, not the styrofoam ones. And then we like take our own silverware. Like you don't need plastic cutlery, right? Ever.
No.
Why? The eating experience is so much better with a real fork anyway. They never break. So just little things like that. Aggregate 7 billion people on the planet, like doing these things will make a difference.
And it will happen faster than people think, because once you start doing one thing that's good, I find, at least for me, and I see with other people, like, well, what else can I do?
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. I've been feeling really good, getting a lot of oxytocin from doing these good things without getting any like initial benefit besides my own like virtue of know I'm doing what is right. It just gets contagious. Yep. And if you're around educating people on the other side, now all of a sudden I'm not just looking at plastics and paper, which was one thing I was just thinking of. I think a lot of people are up in arms about plastic as well, because we like that war on plastic straws. Again, that wasn't a government thing. It is now. They did make a law in Seattle. They did make a law in California. But at first, it wasn't the laws that made the uproar. It was that turtle viral plastic straw video.
Yeah.
That's what did it. So people saw that, and I had never seen anything like it in my life. All of a sudden, I was walking in because I didn't see it initially, and I was walking in the office, and everybody was just like, no more plastic straws, all plastic. And my team was going through like all the plastic straws and making sure they're all getting recycled, and there were paper ones, and they were shamed. And I was like, and it happened in a matter of like a week. I was like, what happened? And that happened, and then laws were made to make sure it didn't, but you're so shamed to be using one anyway.
Right.
And where I was going with that is I think that was happening because you can see it easily. You saw the turtle, you see the videos of the Pacific garbage patch of plastic. You don't see a lot of sex slavery videos. You don't see a lot of chocolate slavery videos.
Right. And yet, readily available. Mitch looked it up in like half a minute. And then here we see this photo. So again, we don't want to see it.
I know, that's the problem. It's okay to look at like plastic in an ocean, but why is it not?
Because the human like experience, I don't know if it just digs too deep into our shame. Maybe there's like some weird like Freudian things there or whatever.
There is.
But I think it's too much. And so we're just in denial and we ignore it. Right? Because I can cope with the turtle. Sure, I feel bad or whatever, but like I can watch that over and over. Could I really stand to watch the harsh realities of how evil human beings can treat each other? And can I really stomach that and then go back to work?
Well, there's actually, I'm glad. I'm going to grab this book. This is Ryan Holiday. This guy's a genius. This was his first book. It's Trust Me, I'm Lying. And so what happened in there, talking about this human side, and what I was just thinking of is pictures of Detroit. You know how those go viral all the time of like the train station that's now empty, malls that are completely empty. Yeah, if you look up like apocalyptic pictures of Detroit, they always go viral. It's like things that companies do that like Gizmodo, they're all like, oh, let's do it again. And they go viral. The ones that don't are the ones that have pictures of homeless people in them and or stray dogs. That is in
people
them.
Are like, oh.
But those buildings, everyone they show that goes viral, you can't see the homeless people in them, but they are very much there.
Right.
And when they do show them, all of a sudden it doesn't. And it's like, I think he explains, I forgot if it was shame or what the emotion is, but it's an emotion that's not shareable. It's just like, I can't see the person doing it.
I can't
see the building by itself. That's like, how could this be? Blah, blah, blah. But with the person, that's not viral enough. Plastic in an ocean. That's
it's like an inanimate object we're okay with. And even the turtle is kind of like, okay, it's a living thing, but it's not as familiar as a dog even, right? Because then that's like a pet. Most people don't have pet turtles, but yeah. So they're like, we need really genius minds around some of this stuff on like, yeah, let's do the straw effect. Like, let's call it the straw effect for other meaningful things. Yeah. And how do we crack the code so that we'll start paying attention, right? When it comes to even plastic bottles. I mean, there's no reason to have a plastic bottle, and yet they're everywhere. And it makes you like insane.
I think that might be one of the best things if we could figure this out. We might not figure it out. Maybe like
maybe not in this episode.
Maybe I'll call you in like a couple of days, or you call me in 3 years. Like, hey, but what is the hack to the brain to make something shareable that shows human suffering?
Right, because like in the 80s, and people get like compassion fatigue, so they don't do it. But they used to say like, oh, the flies in the eyes videos. I don't know if you remember, like World Vision videos or whatever. And it would show like starving children, and they're literally like flies in their eyes, and just like they're not even batting them away because they don't even have that much energy. And it was always just like, ugh, like so offensive, kind of.
Yeah.
Apparently at that stage, it must have worked. They don't do that anymore. Right? No one's doing flies in the eyes videos because it just feels like it's not shareable, to your point. Like it's not inspiring. It doesn't aspire you to a better future. It just shows you how horrible and shitty the situation is, right?
Oh, I remember what it was. Okay, so the 2 most shareable emotions, according to Ryan Holiday in his book, is humor and anger. Anger number 1, humor number 2.
Anger number 1, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Although with the whole fake news epidemic, maybe not.
Yeah. So you get really angry about something, and you end up sharing it. And so people were sharing the apocalyptic pictures of Detroit as they're angry. How can a great American city look like this? Yeah. But sad is one of the least shared emotions. And that's what the homeless person and the dog within that would cue.
Right. So you can't cue a sad. You have to cue an angry.
We have to get people angry about the Hershey's chocolate stuff, or get angry about sex slavery. But you can't show them
the kid, because then that makes them sad.
Pretty much. We have to find a way that how can somebody understand that sex slavery is a thing
make them mad,
that makes you angry about this.
And which is really what made me, I mean, I was horrified. So I feel like that's a combination of sad and angry. I was just like, I was feeling probably 1,000 things at once. But yeah, I like your idea of anger moving people to action.
I guess it's maybe it might lie in how the males treat the females. That could cue some anger. I know it would for me, and I'm not even a female.
Right.
So perhaps that would be something where you see like the girl, what like her life perspective, and
not just her sitting there all like hollow and whatever, like literally someone hitting her makes it then like, oh.
But then it's real, like some hidden camera type footage. Yeah. And that could then make it very.
But there's got to be a shift. I mean, to your point, we do have to like activate the soul, right? Like a higher consciousness. I don't know, whatever anyone wants to call it, all of the above. To just say like, enough is enough, and we're not going to put up with this anymore, right? Like, it's not okay to treat the most vulnerable people in our society like a piece of trash. Like, that's not okay. And not just say it, but then, okay, so if we say it and we believe it, now how do our actions as a society reflect that?
Why is that all the time when people say this kind of stuff? Like, the main thing I see about it, I'm just like, really? Is when people get really upset about climate change and global warming, yet they still drive around in a Subaru. Or not Subaru, a Suburban.
SUV.
Yeah, sorry, not a Subaru. Right. A Suburban, and they still, if they have a lot of money, they're taking a private jet somewhere to a screening of the global warming movie. I mean, I see that all the time.
The irony in all of it. Because people don't like to be inconvenienced, right? They don't like to be inconvenienced. Like, so they can
these other people need to act this way. I don't need to act this way. But you guys need to, because this is a problem.
Right.
They need to realize the irony in that. Right. Like, if you want to do something, be like, maybe all of a sudden you could start a new business that's all about sustainability for global warming if you just were to put yourself towards it. Because you don't see that movement happening as much as it should.
Right.
And I think it's just because
And being able to
maybe
track
it's
it
too
in a
big.
way. I mean, but I feel like when we look about that, I mean, I feel like I've done an app before, kind of like measuring my family's carbon footprint, right? So you can say like, if you live in a house this big, square footage, like we have chosen not to have air conditioning, right? We don't need it most of the year, but sometimes I feel like we kind of do.
Last week.
So yeah, so we might have some fans. Okay, so that's less of a carbon footprint than someone who has maybe our square footage home with AC, right? So then there's all these, and what kind of car do you drive, and how far is your commute to work, and you know, you can do all these things, and then sort of like see what your family's carbon footprint is, and then what are ways to lessen it, and then like work towards. Yeah, we're gonna put back, right? Because some people, it's like, well, they have 8 kids, maybe they have to drive the SUV, but they could do other things, you know, that other families do, like not have AC or something that goes the other way, right? Because we're never going to be perfect. So that's like when I was saying, people can get overwhelmed, but you got to start somewhere. Yeah. And just knowing what our carbon footprint is, I feel like is a good piece of information.
What's the
because
app
then we
used?
can. I can't even remember.
Just Google carbon footprint app. There's probably a dozen.
Yeah. And this was, I feel like, a while ago. I should probably refresh.
I'm sure.
See where we're at or what.
That's fascinating. What I find slightly frustrating, I don't get, I try not to get upset because what's the point? But how few people just ride a bike in this town that's built so many bike paths. There's like, I was riding a road bike in Chicago area, and that was scary as hell. I thought I was going to die so many times. And here, like, people respect, they understand. And there's bike paths like almost everywhere but 3rd Street. We have to fix that.
Yeah.
But besides that, even on the freeway, there's a bike lane that I've used. It's a little scary.
And some of it, I think, is back to your education piece, right? Because as much like I did that when my kids were little. And actually, Jeff and I, my husband, we shared one car. So we were like probably the only family on our street as a family of 4 that had one car. But because I had that double chariot and I would take my kids around to the library, this and that on my bike. And it was
chariot.
great.
Oh, okay. So
it was like a little stroller
cute.
thing behind my bike, right?
Yeah.
So we could go pretty much anywhere in town. To your point, I would like go to Northwest Crossing. I would just kind of be all over town.
And get a good workout
there
too.
There becomes at some point, even as a mom, I'm like, okay, my kids are too big. Like I have to drive them around. And now they have a friend and now we're carpooling or whatever. But carpooling is a great way to say like, hey, let's do this, not just for the convenience of our family schedule, but literally for the planet. Carpool your kids to school or to wherever. So again, it's kind of inconvenient. So when we were talking, I think there was a book or something, The Inconvenient Truth. I don't even remember what it was about, but that title rings in my head because it's an inconvenient truth that we all just have to commit at some point. Like I've told my kids, hey, when you guys are like driving, I'm like taxiing them around everywhere these days, but I'll have them ride their bike. You want to go to the old mill? I don't need to take you. Ride your bike. Yeah. You want to go to the river? Ride your bike. Ride your skateboard. Like I don't need to take you, right? No. So already training them. But I said, when you guys have your license and you're driving and doing whatever, I'm going to get a little scooter. I'll be in like a little Vespa, right? Cruising around town because I can. Yeah. At that point, right?
Yeah.
Riding my bike and doing other things.
Oh well, I think it'd be good if like more people could end up seeing that, and then as they complain about traffic, if they stop becoming traffic. It's like, you're a part of it when you're complaining about it, right? Yeah. Like, oh, it's traffic. Like you're a part. It's not just traffic. Like you're a part of the traffic. Right. Just want to let you know. So, if you rode a bike, then you're still part of the bike traffic, but that's very small. Yep. Well, one thing before that, one last question to leave you on is, going back to the business side of it, which is philanthropy at the same time. What do you think was oh man, this thing has legs and it's going to do a lot of good when it comes to growing a business and giving jobs here in the States and also in India and we have a profit. I mean, this is all around. Look at how good this is. Look at what point was like, this is a really good catalyst of good.
It really was when we spun the business out from under the nonprofit because it was functioning under the 501c3. And when we spun it out and invested in some of the things that businesses do, like marketing and other things that is really hard to do under a nonprofit umbrella, people don't like their donor dollars to go to like Facebook ads or to go to, and so when we spun that out, so in like 2015 to see like, does it have legs or not, that I think was really kind of a tipping point. And by that time, Tom Shoes had already made a huge splash. And so it was already that there was a market, like people are buying goods. And then everyone did the copycat 1-for-1 in various verticals, right? So Warby Parker did it in glasses, like Tom Shoes, made it up. And then everyone just sort of jumped on that bandwagon. We never jumped on that bandwagon, but it was great in that they were pioneering the space, that there's a market of conscientious and aspirational consumers that are out there. And so that was really kind of a win to our back, to know that there's people willing to pay a premium for a product that they believe in and that has a transparent supply chain. So that was kind of the moment. And then we're a very small unknown brand, people maybe in Bend know about us a little bit, not even everyone would. But we're going to get there and we're going to grow.
At the same time, how many millions are you guys doing?
Well, it's kind of ebbed and flowed, but we've done, 4 million in online sales. And so we're really wanting to go much bigger than that in kind of a wholesale space to have like a market penetration, not just here in the US.
You say that like it's small. Like the percentage of businesses that make it to 7 figures is like, I think it's less than 2% or something like that.
Well,
it's
what's even really interesting, and this is what I'll toot, not just my horn, but our company's horn, is female-owned businesses rarely go past $1 million.
Oh yeah,
and that's changing, but it's a pretty small percentage that can grow above $1 million. So that's been nice that we have a group of badass women at the helm doing something cool.
Yeah, we got that too, because Sarah and I 50-50, and so
great.
I don't know that I guess no gender owns us.
It's you equal each other out.
50, yeah. Well, thanks a lot for being on.
Thanks for having me. It was a fun conversation.
It's incredibly insightful, and I look forward to buying chocolate differently now.
And coffee.
And coffee.
And pajamas.
And pajamas. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.